Hi, welcome back to Vote for Vermont. My name is Ben Kinsley, and joining me today is Eric LaMontagne, the Executive Director of Campaign for Vermont. If you haven't watched our show before, we cover a broad spectrum of policy issues in Vermont. And we have our current program that we're running, which is interviewing candidates for the November elections. And today we have Dwayne Tucker. Dwayne, thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Dwayne is a candidate for Washington County Senate. You're running as a Republican, but we've had a bunch of candidates on from all different political parties. So if you're a candidate out there, please reach out to us at voteforvermont@gmail.com. And if you know a candidate that you want to be on the show, also reach out to us and let us know, and we'll reach out to them for you. So. Great. Well, let's dive right in. We ask all of our guests to talk a little bit about themselves, introduce, kind of who you are, what makes you tick. So, tell us about yourself.
My name is Dwayne Tucker. I'm a lifelong Vermonter. I was born in Randolph, Vermont, and I lived my entire life in Washington County. My family is mostly from upstate New York. They're a longtime farm family. I'm a graduate of, I went to Barrytown, attended Barrytown Elementary School and graduated from Spalding High School, and went to Linden State College for a couple semesters, and then got out into the workforce, and then I decided to go back and get my civil engineering degree, civil and environmental engineering degree at Vermont Technical College, and here I am.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And what kind of what inspired you to stay in Vermont, and then what inspired you to run for office?
What inspired me to stay in Vermont was my wife of 46 days now. We had been contemplating for maybe a year or two if Vermont was going to, be it for us, So yeah, we love Vermont. We love the people of Vermont. We love the mountains. We love the winter. Her not so much as me, but Vermont is home.
Yeah.
So we love it here. So that kind of was the reason why we decided to stay in Vermont. The reason why I decided to get involved in politics is because I felt it was my civic duty to stand up for the people of Vermont, the hardworking people, the citizens of Vermont, and make sure we could kind of get Vermont back on track and back to the way Vermont was, a couple decades ago.
Well, it's interesting. It sounds like you've had a lot of the same thoughts that I've heard reflected from many Vermonters, which is the question about, is Vermont a place I want to stay? Is it a place where I can make it work for me to stay? Even if a lot of people that I hear say, I love Vermont, I would love to stay, but I just don't know if I could make it happen.
Right. Yeah, to be totally honest, it's heartbreaking out there going door to door, knocking on people's doors, because with that comes the come in and sit down and would you like a cup of coffee? And you get to know these people, really know them. You get to know where they're from, their whole lifestyle, how many children they've had, and where their grandkids are. And it's upsetting because the affordability in Vermont is an issue, and more and more people are actually deciding to move out of state for affordability, reasons.
Mm-hmm. And it's a story I think a lot of people have heard, and it's not always just for affordability. It can also be for opportunities, right? There's opportunities that other places have that we don't necessarily have.
Right.
Here in Vermont, and I have plenty of those anecdotes just among my friends and the people that I know, and I'm sure the two of you probably do also.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. So, what do you? You're working construction now. Did that influence at all? Kind of the ideas or the platform that you're running on as you run for the Senate.
Yeah, it did. It had a big effect. What I do. I have a little. I've been trying to build a little construction company for three years now. I'm a civil engineer. I design septic systems. Just the possibility of finding good help out there today, especially in the construction industry, is it's a pretty tough task, with the opiate crisis and the heroin epidemic. There's my options in that pool for a good laborer or a good carpenter are pretty slim to none in this area, and it's not just the construction industry that feels the aftermath of the epidemics. It's pretty much every opportunity one could have statewide in the state is pretty rough.
Yeah, and I think it's starting to rebound. Just looking overall, the workforce numbers are starting to rebound a little bit, but the last few years have been really tough.
Right.
I mean, just looking at, we've had a super low unemployment rate, but that's not necessarily because there's a ton of jobs available. It's
Right.
because the labor pool has been shrinking.
Right.
Right, and that's what's been kind of driving that low unemployment rate, because everyone that's available to work is working.
Right. That and I have my own beliefs. I personally feel that the Department of Labor could possibly use some restructuring. I was a consultant engineer for VTrans, the construction division, and unfortunately, you can't work road construction or build bridges throughout the whole winter. So, with that comes a layoff period, and when you're laid off in October, because that's when the construction season primarily ends in the state, and you're not getting back to work until March or maybe even April, being on unemployment for that period of time is it can put you in a hard spot, and I know that when I was on unemployment as a consultant engineer working for VTrans, it was sometimes difficult to collect that benefit that my employer had paid, so I know there was a lot of circles that I had to jump through. So being in the construction field, I know that there's a lot of people who also get laid off, but they don't collect the benefit just for the simple fact that it's such a hassle. So they just say it's kind of easier not to collect the benefit because it's just easy. So they budget their money all summer for that that layoff period.
Yeah, so you have some personal experience with that then, and how that affects people.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's cool. So, what do you hope to achieve if you win in November? Like, what's your biggest goal?
My biggest goal, should I win the election, is just to educate people. Educate people on what's going on in the state, and make them aware that these people have the power to change what's going on in the state. Or stand up for the rights that they believe. There are a lot of critical issues that need their attention, and a lot of people say that my vote doesn't matter. I'm not going to make a difference. Well, that's just simply not true. Everybody's vote matters, and there's an overwhelming number of people that don't vote because they feel that's truly the case, which it's not.
Why do you think people feel that way?
Again, I think there's just certain candidates that don't get the right airtime or convey the right message, it's most people they work a long hard day. They just want to go home. They want to be with their family. They want to sit down and enjoy the time with their children just because they're working 8-10 hours a day. So they don't have time to get involved. I think they just feel the state's going to make the decision for them. That's my own personal belief.
No, I would agree with that for sure. That voter engagement is something that is a huge problem these days. We're overcoming this political apathy that seems to exist, and that attitude of the state's just going to do whatever it wants to do anyways. So how do we overcome that? Is it a matter of how do we show people that their vote does matter and that their voice does actually land not on deaf ears?
Education. Give them the information they need to make sure that they can make a distinct choice on what they believe is what needs to be fixed. Boy, I mean, a classic example is the shape Lake Champlain is in right now. You know, for over 5 or 6 years now, I've listened and I've watched as the media has addressed raw sewage overflows into the lake. Boy, it's been Vergennes, it's been Burlington, Montpelier, St. Albans. It's a crying shame, you know, and there's no accountability. So there's no accountability in that aspect, you know. So if the people really knew how they could take control of that situation, we could hold those towns responsible, you know, for cleanup efforts. It's Vermont in the 80s and 90s was one of the top 10 fishing destinations in the entire country. That's our little state of Vermont right there. You know, that's something to be proud of.
Right.
Not so much anymore, you know, and I guess the frustrating factor for me is our state leaders just kind of pass the buck on that.
Yeah.
You know, and they say, well, it's another rainstorm. We got to do something about these rainstorms. No, we need to do something about upgrading the infrastructure of your sewage treatment facility.
Right.
So,
exactly. And I think you hit something there on, you know, accountability. So I live in Burlington.
Right.
But I have no problem with fining the city if they have a sewage overflow.
Right.
Because if that's what's going to hold them accountable, even as a taxpayer, if I have to pitch in to pay for that,
right.
it holds the city accountable for what they're allowing to happen.
Accountability is a huge thing, and it seems like our leaders have gotten away from being accountable. But with that, like you said, you know, you just stated that you would have no problem paying for cleanup efforts. Vermont State has already been paying. That, you know, the taxpayers of the state have already been paying for almost 2 decades of you know, $25 million for cleanup efforts for the lake, and now they're trying to pitch another tax, saying we're going to need another, you know, $20 million a year for the next 25 years for cleanup efforts now.
Well, and a lot of that is just subsidizing what municipalities should have already been doing.
Right, exactly.
Places like, you know, Burlington, Montpelier, Rutland, St. Albans should have already been doing this,
Right.
and now the state's having to pitch in to cover
Right,
what they should have done for the last couple decades.
certainly.
Well, and unfortunately, a big issue there too is that most of these discharges that you see are actually legal under law. So they're not, the way the law is written is it's if it rains over a certain amount in a certain period of time, they can legally bypass certain sections of the treatment process under the guise of wanting to make sure that they don't flood, that they don't end up with a backup and flood houses. So it's actually considered a protection measure to bypass under certain rainstorm conditions. So when you have laws like that, it's really hard to hold people accountable.
Right. Yeah, and you don't have like secondary storage tanks or something like that. So, so what, in addition to your party's platform, and you're running as a Republican, what are the issues that you personally are committed to, like above and beyond what your party is interested in?
Industry and economic growth. Being a Vermonter is something to be proud of. Vermont's heritage is something to be proud of. Vermont in the 1800s, even in the early 1900s, we were the breadbasket of the entire country. Vermonters have a well-known reputation for being some of the hardiest people in the country. Most hardworking, the most caring. Industry and economic growth are a huge one for me. Seeing my father, excuse me, worked his entire life in the dairy industry. So I would feel comfortable saying that there's probably not a farm that I haven't been in the state, or a store delivering, you know, dairy products to in the state. So so when I see the dairy industry crisis, it hits me, you know, it hits home with me. So the dairy industry is something I'd really like to see revitalized in Vermont. In the 80s and 90s, there were over 12,000 dairy farms, working dairy farms. Today, there are less than 740. And these dairy farmers is what they were bred to do. You know, it's in their life. They're 5th, 6th, 7th generation farmers.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I don't understand how Midwestern dairy prices can dictate our milk prices here in the state. So,
And what levers do we have to address that at the state level? Because a lot of times milk prices are generally set at the federal level,
right?
And some of that is even negotiating with other countries like Canada and their milk prices, and
right, or even South America.
Or South America. Right. Was it Brazil is one of the largest growing dairy economies?
Yep.
And so like what mechanisms at a state level like Vermont, which produces a fraction of the overall dairy industry products, like what leverage do we have?
Currently, not a lot. What I would like to see is more organic, small farms in the state of Vermont, whether it's beef, dairy. I would like to see Vermont and New England be more self-sustaining. There's no, I don't see a reason for importing milk by tanker from South America when we have cows right here that, some of the best dairy cows in the world. Cabot cheese is known for some of the producing the best cheddar in the world. That's another thing that we have on our list of accomplishments here in Vermont that we should be proud of as Vermonters, and we should be supporting these dairy farmers that are producing that cheese, that product. And really, quite frankly, we should be supporting them in a way where Agrimark shouldn't be sending them out suicide hotline numbers when they have their most recent paycheck sent out to them in the mail. That's a disgrace.
And are those the types of issues you're hearing from folks as you're out knocking on doors as well? Is those types of issues, or are there other things as well that you're hearing from folks in Washington County?
Quite a lot of issues. That being one, but that hits home more or less with the dairy farmers, and the dairy families. Another one is the opiate epidemic, the heroin. That's probably number one on the list, because it's affecting everybody in the state, and especially in Washington County. Opiates and heroin, they're not selective on who they affect. They don't discriminate. So that's probably number one on the list that I think really needs to be addressed from a state level. I've spoken with Barrytown Police Department, Barry City, Montpelier Police Department, the firefighters, the EMTs, and I just would like to take a second to say God bless them all, because what they do is amazing. They're protecting people. They're out there risking their lives every day, and they're not supported in the way they should be supported. Priority number one is them getting back homes to their family, and they're dealing with people out there that are dangerous to deal with, especially in today's times. So.
And they walk into difficult situations too. I know we've had Mary Moulton from the Washington County Mental Health Services on the show a few times.
Right.
And they have team members from Washington County Mental Health Services that embed with some of the police units as they're going out on calls.
Right.
So when there's a situation, a call comes in that sounds like it might be someone who's having a mental health episode. They have these teams that they activate that have special training to deal with de-escalation in those types of situations, right, to keep everyone safe, right? To keep
right.
the officers safe, to keep the person who's having, a mental health crisis, keep them safe.
Right.
And that level of coordination, the training, the extra training that the first responders have to go through to identify those types of situations is pretty pretty involved also.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a dangerous job. It's and it's a tough job. And I think right now there's a statewide shortage on firefighters, EMTs, and officers because it's clearly one of the most dangerous jobs.
Yeah, and it's long hours and
Right.
yeah.
So one of the big issues that Campaign for Vermont focuses on, and being that this is a program of Campaign for Vermont, is ethics, government ethics.
Right.
Last year they passed the Vermont's first ever real ethics legislation, created the Ethics Commission. I'm not sure if how familiar you are with how that works, but I would like to hear you talk a little bit about your opinion on government ethics and conflict of interest, like within the State House.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that, but I fully support, ethics violations. My personal opinion, you lead by example, you hold yourself to a higher standard, and especially if you're going to be in the public's eye, it's kind of a requirement, you know.
Exactly.
So,
and we've got a few minutes left here. So day one, say you're elected in November, show up in the legislature the second week in January.
right.
What is the first bill you'd introduce? Like, what is priority number one? First bill you'd get in, like, what does that look like?
Opiate and heroin epidemic, addressing the opiate and heroin epidemic in the state of Vermont.
Is that like more funding for treatment, more funding for diversion? Is that, more tools for law enforcement? What does that look like?
It's actually all of it, Like I had told both of you earlier, pretty much everything on my platform comes full circle. It's more resources. I'd like to do away with so many clinics, the methadone clinics. They're just a tool that allows users to continue. It's a continuation habit, I'd like to see Vermont create some actual treatment facilities. More resources for people. For example, if we were able to build and actually have 3 or 4 different treatment facilities, that would bring jobs in multiple different fields to these treatment facilities. And not only that, the people would be getting the help that they needed.
Right. So more like a more intensive program and a more abrupt tail off than what a methadone clinic provides, like that.
A methadone provides methadone. They provide methadone. A treatment facility is going to provide treatment for the people that need it. These people, they're good people. They need help, and the state is not providing the help for them. Period. So we can put these people through a treatment facility, whether it is 4, 5, 6 months long, and hold them accountable for their actions after they complete the treatment facility, the treatment program.
So, this has been in the news quite a bit recently, but treatment for people that are already into the criminal justice system.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think that looks like? Is it something kind of along the lines of the governor's idea of having a new prison facility that has some of these services integrated into it? Does that look more like today, where they pull them out of the criminal justice system and put them in a specific treatment facility then under supervision, or what is that?
Right.
Do you have any idea of where that should lie as a state?
Yeah, I do. And it starts right off with kind of knowing that the judicial system in Vermont is failing. It's broken. The jail system in the state of Vermont is broken. Our inmates that are getting prosecuted here and serving time are being sent out to out-of-state privately owned facilities. We should be working with our inmates to rehabilitate them, and we should have treatment facilities that will work with first-time offenders. Again, I feel that if you are put through a rigorous treatment program, you do have to hold yourself to a higher accountability. So therefore, you at some point are going to have to hold yourself accountable. That being said, I'm not saying you get one chance and that's it. You know, people get second chances, third chances, and you might even get a fourth chance. But your accountability after that is going to be dependent on the choices you make.
Right. Yeah, it's actually interesting because we just wrapped up a whole series on on the opioid epidemic, and one of the things we heard from some of the folks we talked to is that it's really it's a lifelong recovery. You know, you're always, once you've struggled with substance abuse, it's always a struggle. You're never just quite over and done with it. It's always something that's kind of in the back of your mind, and you have to watch out for. And I think that's true for people who are alcoholics as well as people who have struggled with opiates. Is that it's that daily struggle of just saying, nope, that's not for me.
Yeah, it's a terrible, deep-rooted addiction. That's for certain.
So we got 30 to 60 seconds left in the show here. Give us your stump speech. Tell the camera why folks should vote for you.
Because we need change, and we need leaders that will work from the bottom up instead of the ineffective top-down approach.
Awesome. Well, Dwayne, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Appreciate it, and thanks everybody for tuning in to Vote for Vermont, and look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Vote for Dwayne Tucker.